Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on March 19th, 2026. If any of you are an NLC webinar first timer in the room, know that our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning about please provide your feedback by how to get meaningful feedback to improve your work. And this is with your instructor, Diane Leonard, and she's the president of D.H. Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services, LLC. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist at the Native Learning Center. We're so happy you could tune in for the webinar with us today. If you could follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes, and the material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. The webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. If after today's webinar you want to return to the recording or any of the resource items or the PDF of the slides, you can do so by going to the courses section here on the learning platform. That's where you can find all the other webinars that we've put on in the last almost 2 years. So I encourage you to check that out. And moving forward, if you want to join us for another webinar, you'll log in just like you did today and click on that green banner at the top of the screen. As long as there's a green banner up at the top, that means we do have a webinar happening, or perhaps the webinar sound check beforehand, but that's how you can get into them. Just click on that green banner. We do ask that you join with listen-only capabilities because we are recording the webinar, so it just helps to protect the recording from audio feedback. And if you've joined and you found that your sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use headphones, maybe a Bluetooth speaker, whatever the case might be, if you come down to the bottom of your screen where I have a telephone icon, you might have a headset icon. But either way, that will bring up a list of your speaker devices and you can select the proper audio output. Even though we ask that you join on mute to protect the recording, we do, of course, still encourage class participation. We want to know your questions, your comments, any tech support issues that I can try to help you navigate through. And we will primarily rely on the public chat for that. If you don't have yours open, you can go over to the messages column. That's to the left-hand side of your screen in gray. And if you click on public chat, that will open up a chat between you, the webinar attendees, me, the Native Learning Center staff, and your instructor, who today is Diane. You'll just come down here to the box that says send message to public chat, type in what you'd like to say or ask, and then you can hit enter and everyone can see it. Just below the public chat option, we have a shared notes section. In there, you can find a list of helpful links. I have put a link to today's presentation slides for you in the chat already, but you can also find that link in the shared notes section, as well as the webinar feedback survey, the link to go to our YouTube channel, and the different resource items that Diane has put together for you today. And if you did join and you have your mic on, not to fear, you can always just come down to the bottom of the screen and click on the little mic icon and that can mute yourself. And if along the way you feel like maybe we missed a question or a comment, you could draw our attention to it by using that hand raise feature that's all the way to the right-hand side of your screen. We'd love it if you could get the public chat popping for us now early by introducing yourselves. You can let us know your name, where you were tuning in from, your work or your role in Indian country that possibly led you to today's webinar, and your tribal affiliation, if you have one. You might be a tribal employee and you do not have your own affiliation. Not to fear, you are welcome also. And then just a quick final note while you're introducing yourselves in the chat, there is a menu all the way to the left-hand side of your screen in red. You might not have yours expanded like I do in the screenshot. Yours might be just a list of the icons. But I just want to give you a heads up about it because if you click on it, it will immediately pull you out of the webinar and it'll take you to whatever you selected on the menu. If that does happen, you can always just click on that green banner once again to get back into the webinar. But I just want to give you a heads up because it doesn't do the warning, like, are you sure you want to leave the webinar? It'll just take you to whatever you clicked on the menu. So just something to keep in mind as we go through the webinar. And then while y'all are introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor, Diane Leonard. And Diane, I have made you presenter now.
Thank you so much, Brooke. And hello, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be with you today to talk about feedback. No, not the kind that happens from headsets and microphones online and in webinars, but feedback about how to make our work better, how to make our work stronger. I'm like I said, super excited to be here with you. Often when I'm with the Native Learning Center and serving as a presenter, I'm talking about all things grants. Today is not just about grants. Today is about feedback in any type of work that you're doing in your tribal organization. So while my background is, yes, heavily influenced by grant writing, by grant management, and actually I was a grant maker first in my career, it really is about how do teams, members of teams, provide each other with feedback that help to improve the work itself and also the way in which we work together. So it's just a little bit about me. Our time together today, it's precious. I am so grateful that you have taken 90 minutes out of your, I'm guessing, very full schedule in order to think about how you can get more feedback and also how you can give stronger feedback. We're going to be looking at that idea of team improvement, continuous improvement, team collaboration, with feedback being the word of the day. We're going to start by talking about what it looks like, what it might feel like, what it might sound like to have a positive culture around feedback in your organization. We're going to look at a variety of different ways that you can ask for feedback. And we're going to talk about how you can provide meaningful feedback. It's just as important that you are modeling the positive type of feedback that you would like to receive back as it is for you to consistently ask your colleagues for their input. I do always at the end ask if you have any outstanding questions. I want to make sure we get your questions answered before you go on with the rest of your regularly scheduled day. But I'm watching that public chat. It is literally right here on my screen, front and center. So I'm watching for any questions you have in the moment. I would rather get them answered right away instead of having you hold them for a parking lot type thing towards the end. So please, that public chat, if you have any questions at all, anytime, right in there. Now, spoiler alert, some of you might be new to webinars that I deliver. I sometimes ask for your input, your thoughts, or your participation in the public chat. It is certainly not required, but it really is helpful if you are willing to engage in the public chat when I do ask for some questions or some of your thoughts about a particular topic, or today as we're doing some specific feedback exercises. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that is likely to happen. Certainly not required, but very much appreciated if it's something you can participate in. So I'd like to begin with this quote. Feedback is a free education to excellence. Seek it with sincerity and receive it with grace. It's from Anne-Marie Hoteling. And the reason that I like to just anchor our session in this particular topic with this quote is because it reminds us that we're always striving to be better. We're striving for excellence in whatever our work is that we're doing in our communities, in our tribal organizations. We're always striving to do the best we can. And so we want to approach the work of other people knowing that they are intending to do their best work. But collectively, there's always room for improvement. That is going to be what helps us all achieve excellence singularly and together. So it's about how we ask for feedback and how we receive the feedback. And as I mentioned, I want us to talk about how we model exactly that so that others feel comfortable in asking for and receiving feedback as well. So the culture of feedback in organizations is not something that I make any assumptions about. So I'm not making any negative assumptions about your tribal organization and what the culture of feedback might look like, but rather saying, let's think about what your baseline might be right now. And there's no judgment as I ask any of these questions, but rather just trying to ascertain kind of where are we starting from today. So I have some questions that I'm going to ask, and if you are willing, I would love it if you'll participate in the public chat with your answer. So the first question is about giving feedback. And this is not about your peers. This is not about your organization as a whole. This is about you. So you're only thinking about yourself as you think about a response to this question. The question is this: how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? 1, not great at giving feedback, something I want to improve. 10, I'm I'm amazing at it, like an appropriate humble brag level of amazing at giving feedback. So there's a whole wide range of answers, numbers that you could type into the public chat between 1 and 10. So if you would be so kind as to type into the public chat for yourself, how do you feel that you are in this very moment at giving feedback? Scale of 1 to 10. 1, not great at it. 10, amazing. Always a little room still for improvement. Try to be a 10.5, but amazing at it. All right, so I'm seeing some numbers coming into the public chat. Thank you for your willingness to participate there with me. I'm seeing we've got a really wide range. And I'm not surprised. This is something that's very, it's personal for all of us. It's about what was it like as we were growing up and how we might have given feedback and how might people have reacted to feedback we gave. It could be about what it was like in our school settings for when we gave feedback and what sort of response we've received. It can be about what has it been like in other work settings. There is a lot that is outside of our control today in this webinar for what influences your answer here. But I hope to give you some techniques that will make you feel more comfortable and more skilled at giving feedback. And we'll get to some of those in a little bit. So from wherever you started today, my hope is that we're going to put something in your toolbox, at least one something, that will make you feel a little more comfortable about the act of being the giver of feedback. That's one part of the culture of feedback in an organization. We need to have folks in our team, in our organization, who are willing to give feedback, whether it's neutral feedback, amazing positive feedback, or sometimes the tough kind of feedback, something that you found that you spotted, something that you think maybe needs to be addressed a little differently or have a little more work done on it. So that's one half, the giving. Now we need to think about receiving feedback. And still, I'm asking if you are willing to be open in sharing your thoughts in the public chat, so your rating. This is not about you rating your colleagues or your teams or your tribal organization as a whole, but this is about you personally as an individual. How would you rate yourself? Again, the 1 to 10 scale. 1 is low, not great at it. 10, amazing at it in terms of receiving feedback. So how would you rate yourself about receiving feedback? I put a quick little delineator in the chat box so that we can see the difference between your two answers. And there's no judgment in your responses, just trying to understand where are we starting from as a group today. All right, we're getting a few responses in the public chat. I'll take a sip of tea and give you another moment to type in your response from 1 to 10. 1, not great at it. 10, amazing, humble bragging about your ability to receive feedback. I'm intrigued. I never know when I ask questions like this, what will happen? And so what might we draw as a conclusion? That the average self-rating for receiving feedback for you as a group is far higher than your self-rating related to giving feedback. I think that's fascinating. I'm not quite sure what conclusions we want to draw, but I think I want to flag for you as a group that for most of you, you rated yourself much higher at your ability to take and act on feedback, hear what people are saying, than you did on your ability to give feedback to others. We want to try and be good at both. In fact, I'd love to be great at both. So as we go through today's session, again, as we think about tactics, it's maybe not so much that you're listening for ideas and ways that you can be stronger in terms of how you receive and then act on feedback, but it seems like maybe we're going to be more on the giving. But we want to model the positive types of feedback on both sides. So this will be interesting. Let's think about how we're going to take that self-assessment and learn together today. Now, there is a difference between feedback and criticism. I didn't ask you how you were at receiving criticism. I went with feedback as the word because feedback is intended to be something that, yes, it can be candid, it can be critical feedback, but it is not negative criticism, not if it is fitting our definition of feedback. But sometimes we see folks who think that they're giving feedback, but what they're really doing is giving criticism. And so that creates, sometimes, not always, but sometimes that will create a psychologically unsafe space for a culture of feedback. Because when we think about what it is like to give feedback, think about our difference in your ratings. We had our average for self-rating about giving feedback was much lower than your self-assessment about receiving feedback. I'm not saying this is exactly the situation that's happening for you, but it could be that subconsciously you're worried that the feedback that you give is going to be taken as criticism versus the well-intended, candid feedback that you want it to be. You don't have to say that that's exactly why you might be rating your giving of feedback as something lower than your receipt of feedback, but that is a very common piece of, well, I've used the word feedback way too many times today. That's a very common comment that people will give about their rating related to why is giving feedback hard. Because people are worried about the relationships that they have with those on their team, with those in their organization, with their team members, with their peers. We spend an awful lot of time together every day, every week, every year with our workplace colleagues. So even if consciously you're not doing the math about how many hours, what % of your waking time is spent with these individuals, you know it's a lot of time. And so those relationships, they influence how you feel, they influence how you perceive your overall happiness with your team, your overall happiness with the organization. And so you don't want to create unnecessary strife. You want to have healthy workplace relationships with your peers. And so yeah, that subconscious piece it can have us holding back in terms of giving feedback. That's because we know that if we're not careful, if the person who the feedback is given to, if they receive it as criticism, that's going to create a potentially tense and negative environment, and that can be demoralizing for folks. Even if it's not how we intended for it to land, that is the risk that we face. On the receipt side, though, again, wow, y'all are really, you're comfortable with the receiving of feedback that people are giving you in your workplace setting. So this quote, yeah, like this really might not be anything that you need to worry about. And yes, it is talking about criticism, but I do like this quote from Aristotle. There's only one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. If we're not taking risks, if we're not doing something in service of our mission, in service of our community, in service of our team goals, our organizational goals, then we won't be able to create impact. So we're doing something. It means then, therefore, we are open to some form of criticism. But the good news is, many of you have expressed that you're really comfortable at receiving feedback. I'm not saying you have to be great and want to receive criticism. That's not what we want, but the feedback. And so it's a fine line. We might get some critical feedback, and it just might not always be delivered in the way that we would hope. That fine line is often then what's being talked about as psychological safety. How is it that we're building a team where folks feel comfortable both giving and receiving feedback, understanding that it is in service of making us all better and stronger, whatever our specific nuanced work and specialty professionally might be. So I have 2 book recommendations. And I know that many of you have been in my webinars before. You're used to me making book recommendations. I mean, look at the bookshelves right here behind me. It's pretty common when I talk about books. So the first one on the left-hand side is The Fearless Organization. This is by Amy Edmondson. And Amy did some of the very first research work about psychological safety in teams. And the thing that's fascinating about Amy, this is the first book, but in one of her more recent books, she opens with a story about what it was like to fail in research and learn what it meant to fail in research and how it was okay and how to be open and transparent about what was happening and what had gone wrong. So that story is not in the Fearless organization, but for me, it was some really great context to understand. Here, she's a prolific researcher on the topic of psychological safety, and now she's been transparent about her own fears around failure and feedback and what it was to feel safe and saying, hey, this didn't go as planned. In fact, I might call it a failure for how it went. That's the sort of space that you want to create in your organization. And so the Fearless organization as a book is talking about case studies and examples. It's not prescriptive in terms of how do you get to a fearless organization. Like, it's a lot of nice examples and gives some ideas and some themes for what you can do to create a psychologically safe space. That's the first. The second is much more tactical, and it's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. In fact, there's whole trainings about radical candor. They go into corporate settings and they teach people how to operate in this radically candid way. The image on the right-hand side of the screen is what you find on the book cover. And what I want to flag is that in the upper right quadrant of this graph, there's in the very top at that noon, 12 o'clock clock position, it says care personally. And then at the 3 o'clock clock position, it says challenge directly. And in between those two axes, we get radical candor. When we talk about the difference between feedback and criticism, some folks will take radical candor and they go too far to that 3 o'clock position. They go past what is that straight line that says challenge directly, and they go too far into what is called obnoxious aggression. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. And that's what can be the space for criticism. Now, on the other hand, if you go too far past the care personally, which is the vertical axis we're seeing, then it's into ruinous empathy. And that's not helping anyone either. And so that sweet spot that you're looking for is that idea that you can be open and radically candid with your colleagues as you provide feedback, because it's with the intent of making the work itself, whatever the work is, better, and making the way that you work together better. So these two books together, I just kind of want to smush the pages together because I think they're a great resource. If you are a book or an audiobook listener, I think these are both great resources to help take today's conversation and think about what might this look like in your own organization. So tactically, what could we do? Without having to read the books, you don't have to, it's not required reading. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about your homework assignment or a book report later. But if we're thinking about those two ideas, I've distilled them into some suggested actions that you can do with your team that start to build this psychologically safe culture for feedback. Now, I shouldn't say that it is only about starting to create this culturally, psychologically safe space. You might already be well on your way, but there's always room for improvement, and any time that team members leave or team members are added, you have to pay some more careful attention to psychological safety. It doesn't stay the same. As the players change, you have to readdress how are we creating that space, how are we supporting that space, how are we maintaining that space. So there's a specific activity that some teams will participate in that's a great way to help warm the team up as it relates to feedback, and it's called the retrospective. This is an activity that many teams will do when they are trying to assess and improve how the team works together. This is not about your draft annual report, your logic model, the new program curriculum. No, it is not about the work itself. This is about how you and your colleagues on your team are working together. This event is successful if the team identifies one change that they want to try It can be a very small change. It doesn't have to be anything big. It's not about changing software or working hours or logos. It's not big stuff. It's little ideas. The team thinks about one change, but if they make that one change, they believe it will make their team better, either more effective or more efficient or happier or faster, but it will have a positive impact on the team and how the team works together. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see that there's 3 blue columns. And so the types of questions a team that participates in a retrospective event is asking themselves, they're asking themselves, what went well in this last period of time that we were working together? And what didn't go well, or maybe didn't go as planned? And then they get to brainstorm, what could we improve so that they can ultimately come up with that one thing that they want to test? There are other names that could be given to this type of event. So leave the label retrospective to the side for a moment. Could you let me know in the public chat, have you ever participated in a reflective event like this with your team, either in your current tribal organization or in another workplace setting? Y for yes, N for no. Have you ever participated in any sort of reflective event like this about how your team was working together? No judgment in the answers, just trying to get a sense of comfort or familiarity with this idea. Ooh, awesome. Okay, so Roger, you have. I'm curious, what was the event called, if it had a name when you did it with your team? Now folks are going to be scared to say yes because I'm asking follow-up questions, but since you said yes, if you're willing to let me know, what was that called? Like, what was it calendared as? I'm just curious. So this event, again, it could be called a retrospective. That's a fine label to give it. A reflective event named something that is meaningful to your team, also totally fine. But this event, this is something that has proven to be successful in nonprofit, charitable, NGO, tax-exempt organizations, not just in the United States, but literally around the world. The example that I have for you, though, of a group that used it to grow from a small startup organization into something much larger in just a few years is called the New Bohemian Innovation Collaborative. They go by NUBOCO for short. And they are working to achieve the mission of accelerating world-changing ideas from Iowa. This organization was started by 2 individuals who came from the for-profit sector. And they had used agile project management techniques in those for-profit settings. And what they said as they started this nonprofit organization together was that they wanted to make everything visible to the entire organization. And when they say that, they don't mean just that like work is visible and that there were sticky notes on the wall about what they were going to do, like you see on the screen. But they also meant things like it was totally transparent what everyone's salary was. It was totally transparent about who was working on what, about what feedback was given by members of the board, about what feedback had been given by class participants. There was nothing that was hidden behind a meeting door or a special tech thing that only certain people could access. No, all open and transparent. Now, the retrospective event, what that does is it brings about this spirit of teamwork and of collaboration. And so Eric Engelman, who founded NUBOCO, he was having his team hold this retrospective event at the end of each and every week. And what this did as the team quickly grew from the first 2 to 19 in just a period of 2 years. That's rapid organizational growth, right? Think about it. Brand new nonprofit, just getting started, getting approved by the IRS, to 19 people in under 2 years. That's pretty fast. What they were doing was every week looking for what was great. Let's celebrate what's great. But let's also think about, what are we seeing? What trends are there in the what didn't go well or what didn't go as planned? What sort of challenges and things could we try to address that would help make us better, that would help make us faster? By doing that, they would come up with their one thing that they would change, and they would test that out the next week. It was the most important thing that they would focus on the next week to get in place so they could see, would it make them better? Now, the reason I have this image of the sticky on the screen for you is that their office, remember, everything was transparent. Anyone could walk in at any time. A board member could, a community member, a class participant. These stickies on the wall, these are from their retrospectives. They didn't hide the feedback that was going on between the team members and about things that didn't go quite as planned or didn't go well the last week. It was right there. I mean, that's in a nice part of their office. It's got a painted quote on the wall. You would think that's the spot that they wouldn't like make it super apparent that they're talking about feedback and how to improve. But that went to the core of their culture of feedback. That cycle of, yeah, let's talk about what went well and celebrate it, but let's always look at what could we do to improve and think about small incremental changes. That is part of their success story. And I'd like to help make it part of yours. So this event, again, retrospective is a label that is often given to it, and that is from the Agile project management space, where you'll see that most commonly used. I did have one other book recommendation. This is a much skinnier book. It's called Agile Retrospectives, and it was written by Esther Derby and Diana Larson. And here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is like the Cliff Notes version of the book. So there are lots of ways that you can run a retrospective within your team. And I'm going to show you what I think to be some pretty unique templates that you can use as a visual way to engage your team in this idea. But regardless of what approach you take, there's 4 main steps. I don't know about you, I love a repeatable checklist, something that makes sure I don't forget a key detail. That's what these 4 items are for you. So a retrospective, if you're going to try it with your team, it's important that you first set the stage. Why are we together? We're here to improve how we work together. We're already pretty awesome, but we want to be more awesome. And so that's why we're here. We're not here to talk about the work itself. We're not here to start opening drafts and making changes together. We're here for this period of time to reflect on how we work together, come up with at least one idea that we're going to try to make us better. So set the stage. Step 2 is to gather data. Let people talk about, document, speak about what happened in this last period of time, whether it was 1 week, 2, 3, or 4. The sharing of what people have experienced, the positive or the not so great, that's the data that you're then going to use in the 3rd step to generate ideas and insights. What might be something that we could try? What might it be like if, fill in the blank. Let the team come up with as many ideas as they can. And that last step is to, out of those insights and ideas that have been generated, to pick one thing. One thing that you want to try in the next period of work that you think, as a team collectively, your hypothesis is it will make you better. Now, if we want to go back to like science class, you pick which science topic we're in, but if anything that's got an experiment to it, you would only change one variable at a time in different scientific experiments because you want to know what was the impact of that one change. And so the same is true when we think about an experiment with our team. We only want to change one variable at a time so that we understand, did that change do something awesome? We want to keep it, thumbs up. Did it actually not seem to have any impact? Sort of neutral, thumb sideways? Or, oh no, where is the undo button? Thumb down. That idea, it was a good hypothesis. We all thought it was a good hypothesis. It turns out, no, thank you. We don't want to keep that as part of how we operate as a team. So one of 3 things should happen based on what you pick. You pick one thing, you try the one thing, and then at the end of that work cycle, you decide, are we going to keep it? Are we indifferent? So, I don't know, I guess we can try it, like leave it in place for another week and see what happens. Or are we running for that undo button? No, I didn't mean it. Like, let's take that back. A to you. So I have a few different templates that I'm going to show you, and all 4 of them come down to the way that we approach, again, the psychological safety of these events as a team. On the right-hand side is an acrostic. So the word scrum is in yellow. You can see the SCRUM is the word that is present across these 5 values. This is still related to Agile project management stuff, but these 5 values are what should be present in the team as they approach a retrospective event. The idea that you want to create a space where people are open to sharing, where people are going to respect the contributions of others. We're not going to say, oh no, what? That's not how that happened. No, I'm being super sarcastic, not saying that's what's going to happen in your space, but that's what we don't want to have happen. We want to give people instead, let them have the courage to talk about hard things. Geez, it was really hard when you signed off right at 4:30 and left this project that was due at 5 for one of us to figure out how to finish. Right? That takes a lot of courage to say something like that about something that didn't go well in the last period of work. A lot of courage. But it's an important value for us to try and be present and to bring to our retrospective. We want to have focus on how we work together. Our purpose, our focus is part of also our discussion about commitment. We're here to be better together because we have a shared goal. We have a shared purpose. We have the work and the goals of our team that we're trying to achieve in support of our communities. So there's a lot of underlying value work that it takes to achieve the psychological safety that makes for great retrospectives. And so the reason I wanted to explain those 5 values real fast to you is that the first template that I'm sharing is actually one not just about what went well for the work, trying to give more specific prompts to the team to think about the presence of those values. So everybody can share what went well about anything related to how they worked together, but by providing a template, a spot where they could go digitally, add a sticky note or see it on the screen and then maybe jot down some ideas on their notebook or walk up to the conference wall and put some ideas down. But having this structure that's focused on those 5 values I talked about helps people to begin looking for them, being on a bit of a scavenger hunt to say, are these values present? Where are they present? Which ones are we really good at? Which one maybe was a little hard for us this week? So it gives a slightly different perspective to saying not just, well, when you did this, this is how I felt. It gives us a slightly different label to talk about what might have gone well, and also, to think about what didn't go as well. So that's one particular structure that you could try. In fact, actually, you saw, I guess I'm going to show you 5, because you saw the first one, the most basic of them all, was the 3 blue columns where it said what went well, what didn't go well, and what would be the idea for improvement. So this one's a little more complex. It's an additional idea, maybe like your second try, because it's talking about the values. Another idea for how you could, again, do the retrospective event, but use a visual template to engage the team, to help maybe make it feel a little less structured or to make it feel a little more comfortable for them for sharing. Food works wonders. Not that you have to give people food, although that also sometimes helps, but that you can use food as a fun common denominator for the types of ways that you want to gather feedback. So this on the screen, this has far more than those 3 basic questions. But there's some cool extras in terms of what's here. All right, so you know what? Actually, I'm going to ask you to help participate with me in the public chat. If we were together as a team and we had this board, I'd say, hey, all right, well, everybody, let's take just a minute. And I could say on the board, if it's like a sticky board and you're adding little notes, or I could say in the chat, like I'm going to do now. Hey, why don't you let us know, what's your favorite pizza topping? And yeah, I'm actually asking everybody that right now, not to make us all hungry during the webinar, but yeah, what's your favorite pizza topping? Here, I'll even play along. I'll type mine in. I can't type and talk at the same time, so I'll take me a quick second. All right, now you're like, Diane, what is popper pizza? It means diced jalapeno poppers with raspberry sauce and some cream cheese as part of the pizza topping. Ooh, yes, absolutely all day long. Now I am indeed hungry, and I'm sorry if that's happening to you too. But, ooh, yum, some cheese, some sausage, some spinach. Cool. So by asking something that's icebreaker style as part of it, you're like, oh, I didn't know that about some of my colleagues, but you're loosening the mood so that it's a little easier for us to talk about some of the harder stuff as we're thinking about getting feedback on the way we work together. Now, because this is people might not understand, what do you mean by what made this pizza hot and fresh? There's a little subtext under it. What went well this sprint? Thick or thin crust? Well, that was a fun way to ask, what can we do to improve next sprint? What made your cheese fall off? Oof, right? Yeah, what a mess. The cheese is falling off the pizza. That was the fun way to say, what didn't go well this sprint? Now this one's asking an extra question, a little bonus question, the cold pizza. What could we see as a future impediment? What might be a barrier or something that would be hard for the team in an upcoming work cycle? Great. Teams get to make these their own. This is a team that also would rate their happiness and would rate the success of their previous improvement. So they had pizza squares, triangles, I guess I should say, already on the screen, but they would be given red pepperoni dots. Whether they wanted pepperoni or not, they would just put the dot on for what they wanted to vote. A little lighthearted, still super important, serious questions, but a nice way to loosen the mood as you're getting into it. Now, maybe you say, I'm not for pizza. We could have talked about cauliflower crust. Could have done that. Yep, could have talked about gluten-free crust. I was asking you about toppings, though. I know, not the healthiest of meal choices that we're talking about here, although it is fun sometimes. Now, instead, we could talk about ice cream. Maybe it's a summer month, it's a hot month, so folks are thinking, oh yeah, ice cream sounds great. And so we again have an icebreaker question. We've got a spot where people, if they wanted to, could choose to vote on that last improvement. Was it like, yeah, 5 stars, thumbs up, or was it a thumbs down, 1? But the fun questions still had what is the real question that we want to know an answer to here? Is it necessary to have something so like extra fun? Like, is this over the top to have to do this? For some teams, the fun is what makes it feel more psychologically safe to provide the requested information. And so you'll have to really think about what is right for your team. So we've seen a few different examples. The super basic, the like teal columns of how we could gather this input. The one that was focused on the values, also more serious and traditional workplace look. The pizza and the ice cream, yeah, those are on the fun extreme. Here's the 5th and final that I'll share with you today. And I'd say this one's kind of middle of the road. So it's not like why are we looking at all these cartoony things of ice cream and pizza? Right? So if that feels like, oh, not right for you, and the other ones maybe feel a little too formal, this is kind of the right in the middle. This is the C-STAR retrospective. And the idea behind this is that instead of asking those questions, what went well this last period of work, what didn't go so well, it is a different set of prompts, but it's giving a little more flexibility. It feels like there's a little middle ground so people can decide maybe to feel like they're kind of straddling the line between what went well and what didn't. The idea is, what would we keep doing as a team? What would we do less of as a team? What should we stop doing as a team? Start doing and do more of. So there's a little bit of interpretation in gray between those different areas for where people might put an idea. And if you were to facilitate it, usually I would say, not that you have to put one thing in each section of the C-STAR, but I would ask people to put at least 2 items of feedback somewhere on the board. So again, I wouldn't require that they put 1 in each, That's tough for folks. They might not always have an answer. You don't want them to make things up. But to say, please put at least 2 items onto the retrospective feedback, or please type them in the chat. Please share them with us. And we could still use the same structure to then say, okay, so based on what we've learned here, let's reflect for a moment about what's here. Let's generate some ideas. What is one thing that we want to try? What is one thing that we think would make us better? So you've got a few different options. I won't give you any more, but oh boy, do we have more for you. Our retrospective toolkit, it's one of your free handouts today in addition to the slides. So you can check that out, learn more about even more structures. You really should try to make it your own though. We've seen organizations that they decided pizza and ice cream, it wasn't what they wanted. It was winter time, they wanted something warm. They made a soup themed retrospective. Cool, not mad about it. Still hungry, but not mad about it. That's great. We have seen groups that really went into the pop culture of what the team liked. We have seen a team that made a Friends theme. So that TV show from like the 90s and early 2000s, Friends, they made a Friends themed retrospective. Fine. Worked with a group down in Austin that actually just last October was a speaker at one of our events. And they talked about how one of their team members loved the show The Golden Girls. And that person had been promoted, wasn't going to be a part of the team. And so they made a special retrospective structure that was themed after Golden Girls. How cool. So they still got all their important feedback, but they also, as like a nod to that particular person, really thought about their personality and what they loved and made something special for them. So a lot of options for how you can make it your own. This is not just fluff. The retrospective is helping to create a culture of feedback about how you work together, because while we're going to talk next about all the ways we can make the work better, there's a little secret. Let me show you. This is a book that I do not have on the screen. From The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. How many of you think that this title, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, means that the feedback on the work was so good and was so meaningful that people were able to get through stuff faster? Go ahead and Y for yes and for no. Do you think that this book, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, was really focusing on how the team gets feedback on the work itself, improves the work so they can get it done faster? Like, Diane, this is a weird pop quiz, right? None of us have read this book, potentially. Cliff notes. It's not. It's an N. No. This title, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, this is a book. All the case studies that are in here, they're proving, teams that do the retrospective structure, again, label aside, teams that think in tiny increments about how to improve how they work, they get the work done faster. They get their impact delivered faster. So that's why that is so important, to lay the foundation for a culture of feedback that's about how the team works together. Because if you have that in place, now you're ready to rock and roll when it comes to the feedback related to the work itself. You will already have these muscles as a team for what feels comfortable, for how do you address some of the hard things, how do you think about improvements, and now you can get into the things that people are like, this is my specialty, this is my special degree at work here, and I don't want feedback, or whatever might be the case, something that might feel sticky in terms of how you give feedback about the work itself. So when we think about work, I'm going to quote Brene Brown, if we shield ourselves from all feedback, we stop growing. I'm not worried about you as a group. Based on your self-rating, you're like, no, I'm good. Give me feedback. I'm good at receiving feedback. It sounds like you're here for it. But if that's the case, if you're good at it, I'm guessing and your colleagues might also be good at it, and so they want to receive feedback for the same reason. This quote is also, they want it because they know it will help them keep growing. So then we want to think about how we're going to get better at giving feedback. So let's practice. Now this is interesting because I can't that fast change the order of the slides based on your answers to that earlier question that you answered in the chat. So we're going to practice thinking about the giving of feedback. I would like for you to assess the last time that you were asked for feedback, or maybe over the last few weeks when you were asked for feedback. What did you give back? Did you give something like, looks great, thumbs up, no edits? Did you give something like, oh, it looks good, I think there's a comma that's missing here. If you could fix that, yeah, that's all I saw. That's super, like, it's high level. It feels a little artificial, but what you're really doing is you're giving like a green light. So it matters for how people are asking you for feedback for what you might give. Like, are they asking for a rubber stamp? Like, yep, let's get that out the door. Are they asking for like a super deep dive? Make sure that it's like really picked apart so that it's the strongest thing we could put forward. So we need to have clarity about what people are asking of us so that we can give our best feedback. So here's my question to you. How many of you, when you have been asked to provide feedback by a colleague, have asked the follow-up question that sounds something like, are you asking for my review and approval, or are you asking for feedback on the work itself? Have you asked some sort of question like that when someone asks you in an email or verbally? They've asked for feedback? Go ahead and let me know in the public chat. Y for yes, N for no, S for sometimes. But are you asking for clarification on what they really want and what they really need from you? This might seem like a really fast and not important technique, but people know, like we as professionals, we know we're supposed to ask for feedback. So we do it. But what we need is often different. So this one tweak to your behavior when you are asked by someone to give feedback, what type of feedback are you asking for? Take a quick moment to clarify what type of feedback you're asking for, because you probably are going to read it in a very different way if they're saying like, green light, can I go? Can I send this? Versus, I need like dev editor, deep reading type stuff over here. Right? So it'll help you to understand what's going to be the best, most meaningful thing that you can do to give feedback. And since I know folks weren't feeling super comfortable at asking for about giving feedback versus asking for it, receiving it themselves, I'd encourage you to try that technique as a one change idea. That way, now you've got some models that can help you to give the right kind of feedback, but that one question helps you know, like literally, I don't have a rubber stamp here, but like rubber stamp, green light, or here we go. I'm going to use one of these two techniques in order to give stronger feedback. So the first of the two is HIP feedback. And this comes from that book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, that I talked about before. HIP, there's two H's, there's two I's, and there's two P's. But it gets shortened and it's called HIP feedback. When you are providing feedback and you're thinking about what's the best way for me to give feedback, you want to ask yourself before you deliver it, is this helpful? Is the feedback that I'm giving humble? Is this something that immediately could be acted on? And also, how quickly am I giving the feedback? I'm not going to hold it and then like talk about it 3 months later. Do you remember? Like that's too late for the feedback. So we want to give it something that could be acted on now, but also we're giving the feedback as quickly as possible. And we deliver it in person in whatever way is physically able for us, whether it, like to me, in person, Zoom, cameras on, sure, that's fine if we're not physically located in the same space. Then we get to the P's. public praise, private criticism. If there is something that is not the intended feedback, it's designed to improve, but it really, I don't know, it's criticism, that should be done privately. It should not be done in a space that other members of the team can see it, whether it's in a chat channel, on a meeting, in a conference room. But regardless of what's being provided, it's not about the personality, about who that person is. That's not what we are addressing. We don't want to in any way attack their character. It's about the work itself. So public praise, private criticism. That's a lot to remember because it sounds like it's 3 items, but you're like, HIP has actually got a lot of items that we would want to work in. So I want to give you a different method as well. This is, instead of thinking about the feedback as a whole, this is more like the stepping back sort of model that we could consider for how we give feedback. And this is called the COINS model. This is coming from Anna Carroll, who wrote Feedback Imperative. And the idea is that when we think about the way that we're going to approach delivering feedback, the C is connect. So we establish rapport with the individual that we're going to provide the feedback to. This might be that we give something positive to begin. That's how we might connect. So it's not that we have to connect on a personal level about something outside of work, but we can connect and start to warm up the conversation, talking about something positive that's happened recently for that person's work. The O is to observe, so to share what we've seen. I noticed, I observed, I have seen. So what is it that has been from our position? What is it we've experienced? The I is the impact for what we saw, for what we observed, for what we noticed. This is, and it could be something positive. This is a great impact, right? So this is not the way I'm describing it, like, oh, this is only for negative feedback. No, it's just as important to follow this structure, positive or negative, for how we're going to deliver feedback, because we want to build on success. So it could be if we shared observations that were positive, and then as a result, we submitted that project 7 days early. High five, right? Like, that's fantastic. So the COIN model is for both the delivery of positive, neutral, or not as great feedback. And then the last piece is the N. So what are the next steps? So maybe if it was something really positive, how do we take this and like bottle it? How do we put it into our shared operating processes and procedures? Or if it was something negative, so what could we do to put some guardrails in place that might help us catch this in the future? Or what would be like, is there a checklist that we should update so that we don't skip this step or we don't shortcut this step in the future? So you've got to think about how to make any changes that support the person, positive or negative, and also think about operationalizing it if there was a lesson that was for the entire team. So those 2 structures are things that when I'm considering feedback, I've always got, obviously, books right here, but I have little stickies right under my monitor, because most of my work is virtual with my team, that help remind me of some of the things so that I don't get caught up in the moment. Nice to have a quick little reminder. So if that's a spot that's helpful for you, think about where can you put it? Where can it be a quick reference for you so that if you're getting into a moment where you're going to give feedback, first ask for what kind of feedback they're looking for, and then consider what's the model, what's the structure that you want to use in providing the feedback. By doing that yourself, you're modeling really positive feedback behavior, so that then when you're asking for feedback, you're also getting what you need. One of the things, and remember I said, like, my background, it's all about grants. There's so much grant work in my background, my bio, you're like, not everybody thinks grants are fun. But what will often happen about any written work, not just grants, is that when you email a document, so asynchronously, you're like, hey, could you take a look at this and provide your feedback by close of business on Friday? What often happens? Could be crickets. You know, they're very busy, it gets lost in their inbox. But unless we've got someone who's like really into copy editing, they've got a fierce red pen, they love to turn on track changes, we're usually going to get something that is more like a rubber stamp, a quick approval. Hey, thumbs up, looks great. Yep. Hey, I think that comma. So when we ask for feedback, something that we want to receive, similarly to how now I've suggested that you ask what kind of feedback someone's looking for when they're seeking it from you, when you are asking people to give feedback, think about your language choice. Are you asking them for a review? Are you asking them for feedback? If you give them the gift of a more clear ask around feedback, they'll feel more comfortable with what they're being asked to give, and they'll start to model it back to you. So it becomes a positive feedback loop for everyone in the team and ultimately, maybe the whole larger organization. But so it can be, you are the spot where you can see a change in terms of how feedback is given and received by that asking that clarifying question of people asking you for feedback, and by giving that level of clarity for people you're asking for feedback from. Now, not just does language matter, but the method matters. So asynchronous, it is happening when we are not together. That's a lot like the, hey, we sent it over email, we're circling it around, we're going to see what happens. Somebody's trying to then aggregate all the information into one document. That might be the method that is most useful in terms of maybe people's availability and calendars, etc. Not, can you imagine, like, let's all read a 20-page document together and give feedback live. That doesn't sound like fun. That doesn't sound like the most efficient or effective way for us to do our work together. But how can we be more creative about our asynchronous reviews? So one such example is, and this is a grant example for how I start the conversation, but you can use it in a whole bunch of other like document or created things that usually people are looking at asynchronously. The idea is that copy editing, what is the word choice, what is the comma need? Yeah, that is always important. We can't drop that. But the idea that there's some sort of mock review, there's someone that stands in for the stakeholder. In the grant space, it's a grant maker. In fundraising, it's the donor. It could be that you're standing in for an elected official. Whoever is going to be that end user or the end decision maker, someone in the team or the organization pretends that they're standing in those shoes and gives the review like they were that person. So our team wrote a blog about it, and that's something that you could read more about in terms of like, what does it look like to do copy editing versus mock review in a grant setting? And I like that as an example because so many organizations end up having to write grants in order to sustain or grow their work. So it's an idea that you can take then and replicate in other asynchronous ways of asking for feedback. But here's what happens as a result of trying something a little different. When you ask for traditional feedback, right, someone might say, they might even catch, ooh, I think you need an in-text citation there. I think that's a little weak on the citation. People are going to ask you according to whom. Great. If you then, so you need that, but also if you add the other layer where someone is serving as the stakeholder, someone stepping in for that early feedback before you really finalize it, they might say something instead like, geez, I think you might lose some points in this grant application on the need statement because we don't have all the citable data present. So you didn't think that the first piece of feedback wasn't important, but it's the fact that both types of feedback agree there's different reasons that they are both sharing that type of feedback. And you're like, whoa, if I only have time to make one change, I'm going to make this change because both methods of feedback gave me the same thing to focus on. All right. Yeah, right? Because like time's tight and we've got to get it out the door. So we do have our mock review toolkit as a free download. So it's, I shouldn't say it's a download, it's part of your handouts, but you can get it from your handouts here within the system. And so that way you can learn and try that technique, whether you want to use it in grant applications or anything else where you have some stakeholder, some end user who is not going to be able to give you feedback before you finish whatever the work is. So there's somebody that's like fake. They're standing in for that end stakeholder. So that's one of our favorite techniques to try in settings where it's asynchronous feedback. Now there's some more techniques that we can try. When we think about feedback, we are always trying to be better than yesterday. In this case, our team, we love to say stronger than yesterday. That is one of my favorite things in terms of a hashtag. And that, in fact, if you really want to make it a longer hashtag, stronger than yesterday together, right, or better together. So when we're thinking about how we can be stronger together, that means we need as much feedback as possible. So here is a pretty lightweight way that we could ask for feedback for a whole, we could use it in a variety of settings, but this is one that's often used at the close of a meeting, at the close of a facilitated workshop. So it could be, you're right, there's surveys everywhere. In fact, Brooke is going to put a link to a survey when we're all done with today's webinar. And that's really important. But response rates for surveys, not great. Not great. Everybody's busy. Like you finish something and then you got to go on to the next thing. So what could be a little bit lighter weight, I'm not saying that this is going to change here, that's not my point, but just like you're finishing a meeting and before you go, you add this quick technique. Because could your meetings be more efficient, more effective, better? Maybe. I don't know. Have you ever, like as a group, formally thought about it? So this technique is called fist to five. And the idea is that you're going to pose a question to the group. It might be like, so how effectively do we think that this meeting went today? And there will be the person who's asking the question, so they're in the seat of the facilitator, and then on their signal, everyone who's in the room or in the digital room will show either a fist, so it's like a 0, maybe a 1, all the way up to a 5. 5 is great. It's a 1 to 5 scale, really a 0 to 5 scale since you've got the fist. And the facilitator then is looking for what's the overall quick average of what they see. And if there is time, what they're really hoping to do is ask a 2 or a 3 to help give a statement of reason. Could you let us know why you gave a 2? Could you let us know why you gave it a 3? Because they're in the middle, but they're really detractors. They're really like, they weren't at the all the way at the bottom. You know, if somebody's a 0, you're like, ooh, I got to find out why they were a 0. Somebody that's kind of in the middle, you're like, what made it so it was sort of mediocre for you? That's a good place if you've got a minute to ask them to participate. But so it would go something like this. And then you'd have the fist to 5 up as instructions, or you would have done it before, but so you are finishing the thing and you'd say, all right, everybody, and thanks so much for these 45 minutes together for our meeting today. And if we could, we're going to real quick do fist to 5s. And so fist, we didn't meet our meeting objectives at all. 5, we exceeded our objectives. 4 is like we met our meeting objectives. Okay, so everybody real quick, we'll just on the count of 3, 1, 2, and people could type it into the chat, people could put it on the screen. If you're all together, people show it in the room, and then the person in the facilitator space says, all right, and oh, Diane, I see that you were a 2. Would you feel comfortable giving a statement of reason? And I might say, no, I pass, which is fine, right? That's my right. Or I could say, yeah, I felt like not all the voices were heard today. I felt like we really heard just from a handful of people. And so I'm worried that, not everyone's voices were heard as part of the conversation. It's not a debate. No one's supposed to argue. It's a statement of reason. Here is why I gave it the rating I did. Is it going to change anything immediately? No, the meeting is closed. We're not staying to try and fix all of it right now. But the person who's facilitating is supposed to then consider the feedback as they look at the next meeting. So if someone was asked after, in this case, we used it after a live practice session for a training. Hey, what do you think? How was it? Yeah, it was good. Good. Oh, okay. By using fist to 5s, the person who's then watching and giving some feedback. Hey, here's what I learned. I thought that actually, I made sure I checked every single learning objective. I heard them all during that session, right, and can give more pointed feedback. What do I want to keep? What might make it even stronger for me? So a wide range of places that you can use it. Usually it is not asynchronous. Usually it is synchronous, which means we are together. So everything from meetings to practice sessions to an actual delivery of a training session or something like that could be ways that you would want to use FIST to 5. This next one is called the perfection game. And I love the perfection game. I grew up in the 80s, and so it does often make me think of the game of perfection, which was like this little square that you'd set a timer and you were trying to put all the shapes in the right space before the timer would go off. This game is not that game, but that's what it makes me think of. So a little pop culture reference in case that one made sense to anybody else, but the perfection game is one that can be done synchronously or asynchronously and is something that works really well for things that people can digest visually, can touch and work with and interact with. And the idea of the perfection game is that you are trying to understand for each of the people giving feedback how they would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. You want them to tell you what did they like about it. So first they're going to give you the number. I give it a 7. And what I liked about it, they might even say what they loved about it, if that's the language they want, but what they liked about it, and then they'll tell you what they liked about it, and what would make it a 10 for me, and they would fill in the blank. The perfection game is not about making it a perfect 10 for everyone. The idea of the perfection game is to try and make whatever the work product is as close to a 10 for everyone as possible. So you're taking really the average of what you're hearing for feedback and saying, I can't do that. At least not in the period of time I have, but I can do those 2 or 3 things. You know what? Those 2 pieces of feedback, those were actually conflicting. I'm going to be the one that makes the final call here. I'm leaving it this way. So you're not saying to the folks giving the feedback, I'm going to change all the things that you tell me and I'm going to make it a 10 for you. Rather, you're setting the stage that I'm going to collect feedback in this way from multiple stakeholders, and we're going to do our best to make it as close to a 10 for as many folks based on their feedback as possible. When we think about the perfection game, this is a very real game for my team. They are very used to the perfection game, specifically around things that we're producing that are visual items, whether it be a new handout or an image or a new branding piece as it might relate to, say, like an upcoming training or an event. And so one of the things that used to happen is that people would just make individual comments, things like, could you change the font on that slide deck? Like, to what? Oh, all right. And you might be like, but that's our style guide. We can't change the font. That's what we say is our style. Leaves room for interpretation. It was probably well-intentioned. It wasn't a criticism, but you're like, what am I going to do with that? If we're playing the perfection game, and now you're, in this example, sharing a slide deck, so someone might say, all right, so the slide deck, it's a 9 for me. I like the layout. I like how consistently we followed our style guide. It would be a 10 for me if the body and the slides was just like if it was a little bit bigger. Increase that font size. And somebody might say, oh, yeah, it was an 8.5 for me. I loved the wide variety of images that you used. And I liked that it was not just text on the slides. And it would be a 10 for me if you had more QR codes and links right within it to the things you were referencing. All right, so the person takes it and they try to aggregate and make it as close to a 10 as possible for everyone who gave feedback, which makes that body of work stronger. But it also starts to create a feedback loop for the person who has done the work if they use this style of feedback gathering more than once, they might start to hear some themes. So for example, Megan, who is our awesome marketing and training product owner, has been working with me for 7 years. When Megan and I first started working together, I did not wear glasses. I was 7 years younger. And so over time, what happened? My eyesight, yeah, indeed, it was getting worse. And so as my glasses have progressed over the 7 years, I still am apt to say, you know, it would be great if that font was just a little bit bigger. And so Megan's default, like what her base font is that she starts with for just about everything, is now larger than it used to be because she knew she was catching the theme for the type of feedback that she was receiving playing the perfection game. She's like, that's what I can always do something about, and I can do something about it before I even send it off for the perfection game. So that idea that the consistent feedback from a stakeholder can long-term make the process stronger, make the work stronger because they've been hearing the same sort of feedback. So they're getting it closer to a 10 for more folks before it even heads out for feedback the first time. That's one of the benefits to using some of the feedback mechanisms more than once. Don't feel like you have to mix it up and do something different every time, whether it's fist to fives or mock review or the perfection game. There is a benefit to having it be a known feedback interface for the team members because it starts to create bigger picture changes in what they might present before they're getting ready for feedback. All right, I have still some more ideas. But this one, now we've got to talk about what your AI use policy says, or if you have one. So a quick Y for yes and for no question in the public chat. How many of your tribal organizations have an AI use policy in place? Could you let me know, please? So Y for yes, N for no, question mark if you're not sure. Right? This is a new type of policy. Not all organizations have it yet. When we think about what it means to use AI, oh, right, you're like, that is not what we're talking about today, is it? No, it's a sidebar. It seems like it's pervasive now. It's in almost every topic that we talk about. Somehow it comes up. And here is that moment for today's topic. There is potentially a benefit to using AI as a way to get feedback on work. And the reason I bring it up is that sometimes folks will say, I don't have anybody to ask for feedback from, or everybody's so busy, I don't have the ability from them to get the type of feedback I want. Or I don't want to bother them, so I'm not going to ask for feedback. Those are some of the common barriers we hear to getting meaningful feedback about work. So this next slide, the huge caveat is if your tribal organization has an AI use policy, and if the type of feedback and use in the documents you're going to talk about or the work, if it's something you can pop into AI and it aligns with your AI use policy, green light. Sounds like fun. Is it going to be the most meaningful feedback you've ever received? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Totally depends on the situation. But it could be that when we put information in, it could be that we take like a document, and we've done this actually as a team to play with. What are some of the options? How can we ask for feedback? One of the things we did was we took a draft application, popped it into a tool that we had blocked. It was not teaching a model, but popped in the link to the guidelines for the grant maker, and we said, all right, be a grant maker and tell us, how competitive is this? How well aligned is the proposal with the guidelines that have also been shared? The first time that we asked that question, I was like, oh my gosh, is this like the best thing we've ever written? It was very sunshine and rainbows. It was really positive. I'm like, oh, right, because it wants to make us happy. I'm like, I need you to be a very critical grant maker. You have more proposals to fund than you have dollars available. Please provide that kind of, like, really think about it in a critical way. It was not all sunshine and rainbows then. So usually asking an AI model for feedback is going to start in a pretty positive way unless you give it some strong prompts about what you're looking for. It definitely takes some prompt engineering and finagling in order to get to a spot that will give you feedback that is worthy of your consideration. But there is something that's been interesting in terms of the use of AI for feedback, and it actually ties in to surveys and data analysis. And so when you're trying to think about what are the trends, what might you learn from it, how might you be better, taking an Excel spreadsheet of all the survey responses, taking an Excel sheet of all of the different open rates and click-through rates for newsletters for an entire quarter, putting that into an AI tool and asking, what are some of the trends? Or what might I improve based on what you're seeing? But asking, and I can't even come up with all the thoughtful questions you might ask, because whatever data set you have is going to be unique to you. But asking it questions, helping you to think bigger picture, can give you then, wait a second. So if I use this type of language, I get a higher click-through rate than that type of language. Oh, that is some really now that is direct feedback. I am going to take that lesson and I'm going to implement it on everything else that we put forward. Or, wow, I got the same feedback across maybe I put in surveys for 10 different trainings. Okay, I'm seeing the same themes come across. It doesn't matter, it's not just a one-off. I'm seeing the same sort of feedback. All right, interesting. So it's taking not just a single point of feedback, it's giving you the opportunity to look at bigger patterns. It's certainly, right, looking at individual interactions, like looking at a single webinar report, gives you an idea. Sure, I could start, I could stop, I could continue doing, but the bigger sample size of putting in multiple into a tool and asking it to aggregate and asking it to provide some trends or a quick summary report, a fun little visual, a dashboard, whatever. All of a sudden now, that's taking a whole lot less time, but it's also not putting more pressure on my peers who are already taxed. They've got a lot going on. Do they have a lot of time to give other feedback? So I think there's a few different ways that to our benefit. Again, if AI use policy structure allows for it, there's some pretty creative ways that you could take all sorts of different data sets in order to get feedback that is specific to the type of work that you're collecting data on. Yeah, I know that was super generic, the way that I just described it, but we've been playing with this in everything from webinar surveys like I just described to grant strategy changes over multiple years. That's a great type of feedback to give to a leadership team. We've used it to look at, I just quickly described some of the marketing email newsletter stuff. We keep playing with it in different segments and with different organizations because sometimes, right, it can be faster. It can give bigger trend stuff, but again, within AI use policy. Now this last one, it might be my favorite. And should I have saved it for last? Oh, I don't know. Okay, so the science fair. Did anyone like going to science fairs when they were younger? I thought, actually, it was more the invention fair that my school held that I loved. They called it the Invention Convention. I still remember when I invented, air quotes, something that would squeeze all the toothpaste out of the toothpaste tube. I thought that was going to be that was it. I was going to win. Spoiler alert, I didn't win. But it was all the kids in the room showing off their inventions. Oh well. So, but that idea where there's multiple things to look at, that's the science fair idea for feedback. If you think about how much time I've talked about colleagues, and they don't have time, and how are we going to get the feedback? If you have a culture of feedback where people want to give feedback, what's likely to happen is that all of a sudden people are like, oh, I don't have time to give all the feedback that I'm being asked for, but I still really want to give it because I know how meaningful it is. So depending on the type of work that you have, we've seen the science fair feedback structure work both in person and digitally. And the idea is if you have multiple people or multiple teams that need feedback on a pretty overlapping timeline, create a science fair. All right, here, folks, all our stakeholders, here's what's going to be present in the room. We're going to give you 30 minutes to walk around and talk to people and offer feedback, and then you'll be done. Or if it's digital, all right, we're going to invite everybody into a Zoom room. We're going to have the breakout sessions. Each team or each individual asking for feedback is going to be in an individual breakout room. You can go to as many as you want in this time box, and that way you can give feedback to lots of folks in a much shorter period of time. That is a super cool calendar saver for those super busy stakeholders who are getting asked by lots of individuals or by lots of teams for feedback. And it sounds like an odd sort of fun, but it really is. And people are so grateful that they get to give the feedback, but that it does not sync their calendar for like an entire day to go to all these different team meetings and give feedback. So I'd encourage you to think about what that might look like in your own organization. Now, I have shared some of the feedback techniques that I use in my team, that I see other people using, that other Agile coaches have tried. I'm not saying these are the only techniques for asking for feedback. What I'm hoping you're thinking about is that they are different techniques than the very traditional, hey, could you please provide feedback on this attached thing or on this linked thing by close of business on Friday. That's really what that whole toolbox of feedback techniques is designed to do, to get you thinking about feedback in different ways. They've been amazing, amazing, amazing being interactive in the chat box throughout. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about any of the feedback techniques talked about today, or establishing that initial feedback, the culture of feedback that we talked about earlier on. We'd love to take your questions in the public chat now. I'm also happy to answer your questions after today. You can always email me, diane@dhleonardconsulting.com. And speaking of feedback, hey, I see the link to the feedback survey in the public chat. Thank you, Brooke. And I'll let Brooke come on and talk about that. But I just also wanted to say, if email's not what you want to do, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to connect there and answer questions as well. And we've got lots of other free resources on our website in addition to the handouts that we're part of today. So feel free to check those out as well. But thank you for being here, and in advance for filling out that webinar survey, because that feedback, I love it. And I know you're all practicing at giving feedback, so thanks in advance.
Yay! Thanks so much for another amazing presentation, Diane. As Diane said, I put the link to the webinar feedback survey for you in the chat already. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes. They are anonymous. Don't have to worry about your name or email being connected to it. It just helps us at the Native Learning Center know what's working, what we can improve upon, and we do share the feedback with our instructors also. So it helps everybody involved. We hope you can join us for our next webinar that is going to be coming up next week on Tuesday. This will be another webinar with Diane, but this time on using Agile to unlock the success of nonprofit collaborations. So that'll be same time, same place. So 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, or 10 a.m. if you are in Alaska. Feel free to check out this as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. YouTube is a free resource for everyone to use, and our Cathedra Webinars archive, which is its own separate playlist, goes back about 2.5 years. So there's a lot of really good stuff on there. And if you ever need help finding something specific, you can always shoot me an email, and I'm putting my email for you in the chat right now. We hope you can check out our other upcoming events. We post about them on our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And we do have an in-house produced podcast, the Hope of Thinking Native American podcast, which you can listen to wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or if you're like me and you actually like to watch the people talk, we do record our interviews with our special guests, and then we post about those on our YouTube as well. There's a separate playlist that says Hope of Thinking Native American podcast. But otherwise, that is all we have for you today, folks. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and your weekend beyond. And thanks so much for tuning in with us. And thank you, Diane. We will talk soon. Bye, everybody.